Hey guys, this is Doug. I'm here with Jesse from Boring Conversation,
Hey everybody, how's it going?
and today we are going to be continuing our faction focus series. We're starting off with Harold Tull and the Cavalier keyword. So, a little bit of background on Mr. Tull himself and his Cavaliers. Uh, Tull is from the King's Empire, so he's actually an Earthside character pulled from the other side, and he was shipped to Malifaux by the higher ups within the King's Empire for being, I would say, how do you want to call it, Jesse? A little non-standard in his practices in terms of how he achieved the things he was meant to achieve. But
You know, yeah, he gets stuff done
he
one way
gets
or
stuff.
another. He gets stuff done.
Stuff explodes one way or another effectively. So they sent Tull to Malifaux because his methods, while effective, were quite explosive. So Tull finds himself basically facing down all of the Burning Man nonsense, and he brings with him his cavalcade of machine guns, mortars, guys in metal suits, and quite a lot of healing and quite a lot of shooting. So we're going to start off by just talking a little bit about what the Cavalier keyword does at a very high level. And then we're going to walk through a little more specifically how the first version of Tull functions, which is Tull the Artillerist. And then we're going to talk a little bit about his, I guess, what we would call the title keyword, right, Jesse, is the dead shot keyword.
Dead
Um,
silent, yeah.
or sorry,
Yes.
dead silent,
hmm
and how that functions. And then we're going to call out any specific out of keyword hires or things that we think are particularly fancy and cool about this faction from the Madness book. And you're going to be seeing Jesse doing 5 additional faction focuses with us, covering each one of the different new keywords. So Cavalier in general, I think it's fair to say, Jesse, is a ranged keyword, right? Um, Tull himself being an artillerist, or a guy that likes to use big explosive guns, has a particular affinity for what are called bom- bombardment markers or assault
Salt
markers,
markers, yeah.
which are effectively 30 millimeter markers that can be dropped all over the battlefield. And they do 2 things. One of them is at the end of a turn, any enemy model within 2 of an assault marker has to pass a static duel. It starts off at a move 12 static duel, and it gets harder by 1 for each walking cannon that's in play, which are his totems. And they pulse out damage that punches through armor. Now, the other thing that they do is tied to this ability called Heat of Battle, and that's an ability on a bunch of different Cavalier models.
hmm
Effectively, what that does is it allows a model at the end of its activation to discard a card to take a non-fast action. So you can get a lot of AP efficiency out of these Cavalier models, which effectively means you can get a bunch of extra shots on a lot of his key models. One of the most key models that you're going to see that out of, and we'll talk about at the end here, are his Hexbow archers. So you're kind of getting a Parker Barrows style effect where you're raining down shots on your opponent effectively. At least from the artillerist side of things. Now, Tull in his first version, which is called Artillerist, has a pretty powerful grenade launcher, which is, I would characterize as just kind of a powerful generic weapon. And then he also has Heavy Salvo, which is a really, really, really good ranged shot action that can push models, enemy only, unfortunately, but it can push models ignoring terrain and other models, and then it staggers them afterwards. So effectively, he can protect his own gun line with a very powerful move-based stat 6 shot action. So kind of in essence, in my view, what he's doing is he's supporting his own ranged crew, keeping enemies at bay while dropping bombardment markers on them and peppering them with all sorts of shots effectively. I mean, any other takes on kind of Harold Tull Artillerist here, Jesse?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that's kind of cool about Artillerist versus the other version of the Master is the way that they kind of work with the assault markers. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but Harold Tull Artillerist really focuses on generating assault markers, potentially moving some assault markers around. The way that he works is at the start of the turn, he'll drop an assault marker, a number of assault markers equal to the turn number, anywhere within 18 inches. And then he also, on his bonus action, can drop additional assault markers. Now, Dead Silent, which is the title version of him, doesn't really do much of anything with assault markers. It really kind of changes the way that the two of them play and interact with their crew. This particular version of him really is going to make it much easier for the keyword to use its Heat of Battle ability, because to your point before, at the end of their activation, they have to be near either a ski marker or a friendly assault marker, or I believe they can actually be next to the King's Wall as well.
The King's Wall has a symbol of the realm, so he himself is always assumed to be a ski marker.
Or a ski marker for the purposes of that ability. Right.
For the purposes of the Heat of Battle ability, yeah.
Right. So one thing that you're probably going to find with Harold Tull is he's really going to enable his crew to have flexibility and be able to utilize that Heat of Battle ability, which is super, super powerful. But one of the things that I do think you'll probably find when using this version of it is that you're going to end up being pretty resource strapped, because every time you use Heat of Battle, you have to discard a card. He doesn't have Arcane Reservoir, and looking over the entirety of the keyword, there's very, very little in terms of resource generation.
Yeah, they give it to you. Yeah. They give it to you on the walking cannons on resupply, but that's just 2 triggers, which will give you basically crap cards back to your hand.
Right. So basically, the keyword has some ways to generate cards that you're not going to use for anything, probably except for Heat of Battle or maybe a couple of simple duels here and there. You're basically going to get 1 free card for each walking cannon activation, and then I believe that there's one other model in the keyword that allows you to draw a low card back into your hand as well.
I think Sappers will get you.
Sappers will do that. Yeah.
Yes, Sappers can get you more cards.
Right, exactly. But aside from that, the only card draw that you really have is on Harold Tull himself. So he does have good for a laugh on Heavy Salvo, which is a super powerful ability. So one thing that I think you'll probably find yourself doing with Harold Tull, Artillerist, is kind of switching up his play style in, from turn to turn based on the pressure that you have on your hand, and what kind of hand you actually have. So what you can do with it. If you find that you're really going to be strapped for cards, you might end up holding his activation until, kind of middle turn, and then focusing on really utilizing Heavy Salvo to knock enemies out of position, deny scoring, and then hitting the good for a laugh trigger to draw a bunch of cards.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The thing with Heavy Salvo that really stands out to me is that it targets its enemy only, so thankfully you can't target your own models with it.
Oh, that'd be so gross.
That'd be ridiculous.
Imagine?
So,
can you imagine that?
You can only target an enemy once per turn with it, but it pushes them 6 inches away from this model, ignoring models in terrain. So you can actually push an enemy model on the other side of like an impassable piece of terrain, like a wall or like a large building, and stagger them. Yeah. And do some damage as well.
Or imagine pushing. This is the use case I've been dreaming about. I can't wait to excitedly text you this the first time it happens in RL, hopefully to Sam, hopefully tomorrow. Imagine you shoot a model, you push it into the dead middle of a forest patch or a severe terrain patch, auto stagger the model because it staggers it once you hit it, and all of a sudden it's starting an activation staggered in the middle of a severe patch. And ideally, this is a model that doesn't have movement shenanigans and doesn't ignore severe. So you're really kind of like taking that model out of the game for an extra turn or turn and a half,
Yep. And so much the better if that happens to be into a piece of terrain that also happens to be hazardous, patch cactuses or pool of lava or whatever. Yeah. And then it's not like that staggered is just going to take the model out of the game, because if there happens to be an assault marker near them at the end of the turn, it's also going to reduce their move. which is going to make it harder for them to pass their move duel or suffer damage.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, let's say you draw a real crap hand, you get maybe like 1 or 2 decent cards. You could theoretically go with Harold early, pitch a high card to make sure that the heavy salvo goes off, hit the tome, take an enemy model out of the game for the turn, depending on what the board state looks like, and pitch a junk card, draw 2 cards to go back up to max hand size, and now you're still in a decent place for the rest of his activation, or continuing to maintain the resources that you need to get those heat of battles off. So that's pretty cool.
I think that's a good call out. I think what you just described is Harold Tull Artillerist in attack mode versus when you kind of have to push the crap button if there's too many people getting too close to your gun line. And I think at that point it's a little bit more of a smooth brain approach where you're just trying to hit as many independent models with heavy salvo as possible and pushing them backwards. Or a really spicy thing you can do, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, there is a wombo combo in this keyword, and it is John Watson into King's Wall, because they both have very strong overlapping defensive synergy buffs. So you could push that model into engagement with the King's Wall. When a model is engaged with the King's Wall, all friendly Cavaliers ignore all negatives to targeting this model, and then they can't really beat up on the King's Wall because they're going to be having a negative to a damage flip, trying to punch a thing at defense 7, and God forbid they try to punch John Watson, which would put them at a double damage neg flip and a normal neg attack flip. It's just a crazy tar pit that you kind of like build your own tar pit, basically.
Yeah, and one kind of overall thing, just with regards to the keyword, and this will affect both versions of the model, is that you'll find that this keyword in general, and Artillerist really builds on this, it really, I think, does simple duels simple duels against enemy models the right way. Like, you look at Wong, for instance, in Bayou, and he's the shockwave master. He drops a bunch of shockwaves, he generates simple duels, but he's like kind of the only model in the crew that really does that. The rest of the stuff is just kind of like traditionally punchy, and a lot of times you end up with a Wong activation that just kind of like doesn't do anything.
Or you pump a lot of effort into causing a lot of simple duels, and your opponent's like, all right, I'll like natty pass like 2 or 3 of these, and then I'll spend like a couple of medium cards, and then the real thing you wanted to do, which was tax the severes out of their hand, you never really ended up getting to do in the first place.
Right. So with Harold Tull and the Cavalier keyword, with Artillerist in particular, basically every model in the keyword has some way to generate simple duels that do damage to enemy models. Or like with the walking cannons, they just have some kind of like incidental low stat attack that can potentially do some damage. But there's a lot of opportunity for, with Harold Tull Artillerist himself, some unresisted damage on his main attack, which is pretty gnarly. Or just absolutely covering the field in simple duels that if your opponent doesn't spread out a little bit, or a lot bit, they're really going to find that they're going to run out of cards fast, or they're just going to incidentally flip enough bad cards in these simple duels that they're actually going to matter. It's not like 1 or 2 models are going to take a damage or 2. You could potentially be doing 2 to 4 damage or even more to most of their crew in the course of a turn. It's pretty gross.
And I think something that goes hand in hand from a design perspective with exactly what you were just talking about, if you look at kind of, at least in my mind, what is meant to be the cornerstone of this faction, like the model that's meant to be kind of the you always at least take a couple of these, which in my mind are Hexbow archers. Hexbow archers have a rule called Ruined Quiver, which says once per activation, when this model is declaring triggers on an attack action, it may target an enemy model, or when it's targeting an enemy model, it may add a suit of its choice in its final duel total, unless the target first discards a card. Now, that's really relevant for Hexbows because they have 4 triggers, and each of them is really powerful. So effectively what you're doing is you're putting additional hand pressure on your opponent before you hit that end stage, and you're triggering Ruined Quiver at least 3 times, which means your opponent's going to have to pitch either 3 shitty cards to you, or you're going to be choosing between King's Glory, which is a free shot action from any Cavalier model, Puncture, which is, just a good trigger, Cleansing Strike, which is also a good trigger, or Blaze that's built in, which means that you could then get an additional Blaze trigger, which means all of a sudden you're doing Burning +2 on a model that for a fast action gives itself a blast on every attack it takes.
Yep. Now, and to kind of, serve as a little bit of a counterpoint to the whole hand pressure thing, and the fact that this crew can put out a ton of simple duels and spread damage out all over the place, with the exception of really Harold Tull himself and the King's Wall to a certain degree, most of the damage tracks in this keyword are pretty underwhelming. You see a lot of 2/3/4s, 1/2/3s, 1/3/4s. Nothing in the keyword has anything higher than a base 2 min damage.
Yeah, I don't think there's a min 3 beater here at all.
There is no min 3 beater in this keyword. Now
that just
Harold,
means bad, right, Jesse?
What's that? No. So I will say, thankfully, they had the foresight with King's Wall and its enhanced fists, which is the same attack that
to not make it a min 3.
Yeah, no, it's the same attack that what do you call it? Witchling
Thralls
have. Witchling Thralls have, or not Witchling Thralls. What are they called?
No, they're the enhanced fists.
Yeah, Witchling Thralls. So they did have the foresight not to put Crit Strike on it, which I'm very thankful for, because that would get a little silly. Even Harold Tull himself, like his damage track on his gun is 2/4/6. Now, to be fair, it also does a damage to any enemy models within a 2-inch pulse of the intended target. And if
on a ram, it is even better than a min 3 because
exactly.
It pulses individual damage again.
Yep,
So.
And if he happens to hit the concentrated fire trigger on the ram, and they happen to be near an assault marker, then it'll also deal an extra 1 damage to the target and any other enemy models within a 2-inch pulse of it. So like he can bring the pain if the enemy is in a bad position. But that said, a lot of min too. So the only other thing I wanted to call out on Artillerist before we move on, because I do think it's really, really important to mention, is his bonus action, Artillery Strike, is pretty impressive. It is an 18-inch range, doesn't require line of sight, only needs a 4 to go off with no suit required to drop our assault marker anywhere within range. Like I said, ignoring line of sight.
And that tome trigger is strong.
If you hit the tome trigger, it's also going to remove any number of markers, not all markers. You don't have to get rid of everything if you don't want to. Any number of markers within 2 inches of the dropped assault marker. So like he can be getting rid of key, ski markers or terrain markers or whatever else your opponent's really relying on, and there's basically nothing they can do about it because they can't hide it from him.
You got a Hoffman 2 matchup? Don't worry about those pylons. Just clear it out, baby. It'll be fine.
Absolutely. And then, he also does a little bit to reduce some of the hand pressure on his crew because he can give out adversary on a stat 7 attack targeting willpower.
So you have your target.
Yeah. So pretty good odds that he's going to be able to get it off. It's not something you're probably going to do all the time, but
I agree.
It is there.
But you know what I think that's useful for? I think that's useful in the case that like an opponent tries to solo aggro you with an individual big threat, and then you can basically heavy salvo them, say, into the tar pit pocket we talked about, and then hit them with a you have your target, and then that just makes it easier for like your Hexbows or everything else to just pepper shots into them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know what? It might not be something that you do necessarily all the time, but you can easily, to your
have
point,
it in your quiver as a move that you can fall back on.
You heavy salvo a big enemy beater back into the middle of their crew at like the start of turn 2 to get it out of your face.
Yeah.
You give it adversary, you hit the focus fire trigger to force a bunch of, moderately high willpower duels. TN13 willpower is nothing to sniff at. Or push a bunch of enemy models close together and then drop some grenades on them to splash out a bunch of damage. Like, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. Oh, the last thing I want to talk about as a point here is because of get into position, effectively, whenever Tull triggers, you can get 2 models out of enemy engagement most of the time because you can just pull them back. Because there's nothing really in the game that has a 3-inch reach in melee. and so you can get that. You can use that to kind of get out of jail free cards for up to 2 shooting models, or you can kind of push models out of cover or out of concealment and into the open with that to get better shots as well.
Yep.
Which is
And
nice.
it's not other model. He can do it to himself.
Yeah, he can
So,
also
I mean,
he can also save himself.
Yeah. He can, and the other cool thing about this is, like, let's say it's on him, and he happens to be out of line of sight, like behind a building or a piece of terrain. At the start of his activation, he can just move laterally, get out of, get that piece of terrain out of the way, and then just start doing his job. It's pretty cool.
Anything? Well, I guess what are the high notes that we want to focus on for Dead Silent? Because I think we've given a lot of love to Artillerist here. I mean, I'm gonna play Artillerist a heck of a lot. That just vibes with what I'm doing as a person in Malifaux. But what stands out to you on the Dead Silent card, and what stands out to you as like the differences here? When would you take Dead Silent over when would you take Artillerist in your mind?
Sure. So I would say Dead Silent really stands out to me for being extremely durable. I mean, you look at him and you're like, he has 10 wounds, like he can't be that good. But then you look at his, I mean, he has stealth. He always has severe and concealing terrain around him.
Yeah.
He can just bamf over to a scheme marker within a 4-inch aura, which is a huge area. Most of the models that can bamf over to a marker can only do it within like 2 inches, or can remove a marker to reduce damage, can only do it within 2 inches. He can do it within a 4-inch aura and place. So like an enemy model is usually probably only going to get like 1 attack on him if they do manage to get in on him. Easily, if somebody manages to get inside of his stealth aura, he can probably just, take a shot and then bamf out. Now he's outside of their stealth range again. It's pretty gross. Plus he's stat 6s across the board. Like,
I could have sworn when I read Behind Enemy Lines that's an ability that should probably be on an Arcanist model, probably in a Colette crew somewhere. Definitely not in a guild crew, which is really cool. That is quite a cool ability.
Yeah, for sure. So like one of the things, I like playing Ivan in Explorer Society a lot, and there's a lot of stuff that I like about Ivan too, but he does have some significant weaknesses that stop me from really bringing him to the table. Probably his best ability on his card is his displacing shot, and Tull has it for all intents and purposes. I mean, it does
and
the
other
same
things.
Yeah. So the other cool thing about this is that it doesn't drop a shadow marker. Which like shadow markers function for specific purposes in the Ivan crew, but this drops a scheme mark, which is like you can use it for stuff in the crew, and then it also can like score points.
Yeah, that just scores points for you straight up.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And just being able to use it on friendly models to swap around positions, pull a friendly model out of danger, and then put the King's Wall in your opponent's face is gnarly.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's kind of funny because you said that you would play Artillerist a whole lot. Looking at the two, I would probably end up playing Dead Silent more than I played Artillerist.
Yeah, that makes sense given what I know about you and your play styles. Plus, you're a big you love playing Mizaki and Ivan. You love playing both those masters. So that style of play kind of, I think, speaks to the soul of what you like to be doing.
And the thing with him, like, you can't, it's not necessarily something you can guarantee the setup of, but just the fact that he has access to a potentially min 4 12-inch range shot that ignores hard to kill is really scary. Now
he also has Gunfighter on that too. Which is
you were gonna say something, Doug? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, he has Gunfighter on it, which means that unlike a lot of other ranged masters, he's not stuck without like a melee engagement or anything like that. Would be.
Incidentally, both versions have Gunfighter, because why not?
Yeah, because why not? Why not also just put that on Artillerist as well?
Yep. The other cool thing with him is like, he does have the ability to put out hazardous terrain, which is pretty darn cool with his Fog of War ability. I am a big fan of anything that puts out hazardous terrain, and especially with the number of like movement tricks that this crew has to, let's say pick up and drop an enemy model with a Rocketeer or any number of other things. Being able to push a target, give out focus, create hazardous terrain, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. And then there's a couple of other callouts I want to make just really quickly in terms of some of the big synergies that stand out to me just in Cavalier in general. Anything you want to touch on before we move on to the crew from Dead Silent? Any other last?
Nope.
I think that was a great overview of it, to be honest, kind of comparing the two there. Specifically, we've talked a little bit about the King's Wall. I think most Cavalier lists see this guy in it. And I think most lists also see John Watson, because these guys go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, I don't know how you leave either of those models home. They're both incredible.
The craziest thing that I saw on King's Wall, so King's Wall has bulldoze ability, which we've seen on a bunch of masters in the Malifaux Burns book, but he has a tome trigger called Create an Opening. It says,
so
until
crazy.
the end phase, friendly Cavalier models may move through, but not end on, any impassable terrain that this model moved through during this action. So
he literally Kool-Aid mans through walls.
Yeah, you can Kool-Aid man through a building, and then your guys can just walk through it.
And of course, they don't just walk through that spot. It could be like a 16-inch long wall. They can just go through any of it because
they can.
Why not?
And to the point beyond that, your Hexbow archers can run and gun through that.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you leave King's Wall home. I'm pretty sure that it's an auto, and then John Watson, like you said, is probably an auto. Also, one point that I wanted to make, and this ties right into John Watson, who I'm sure we're going to go over a little bit next, is you forgot probably the most important thing that Harold Tull brings to Malifaux from Earthside. Do you know what that is, Doug?
A little puppy bulldog in a World War I hat that hands out syringes at 8 inches.
And a cat.
Oh,
you
and
forgot
a cat.
to mention Walter, the cat.
Oh, yeah.
Harold Tull's cat.
Yeah.
Of course, we're just about to talk about John Watson and Frederick.
Yeah, I love Frederick. He's a good boy.
Yes.
So Watson is a 7-point enforcer. He has effectively an 8-inch non-line of sight needed heal for his Surret. Effectively, he gives his medicine to his dog, and his doggo runs over and heals whoever needs it.
Yeah. And one cool thing about that ability you were just mentioning, where his emergency Surret action can go up to 8 inches because of his little friendly dog. It also lets his assist action do that, and he has quick cure. So like one of the downsides to using the assist action is that you have to be really close to friendly models to do it. And even like Sun Kang or Sun Quang or whatever his name is in Thunders, he does have quick cure, but it's still, you have to be next to a model to use it. So a lot of times you end up walking next to something, using assist, refunding your action, and then you get to do one other thing. John Watson doesn't have that problem because his assist ignores line of sight and has an 8-inch range. So it's literally basically free.
And hey, you know what he also happens to have? An absolutely insane melee attack that's a stat 6. It's a 2-3-5 track, so it's not the craziest track out there, but it ignores hard to kill, hard to wound, and armor, and it also has a tome trigger, which is additional healing. So
why is that stat 6?
Why is he good at everything? It's amazing. I'm so excited.
And just a random 14-inch gun, doesn't have triggers. Who cares? It's just a nice thing to have.
Which the Hexbows can proc off of, so he can be a target for the Hexbows, which is nuts.
Yeah.
So then the last unit I really just want to call out here, because it's the one that I'm just so excited to play with. I'm not going to spend too much time on Hexbows because I think we've kind of generally sussed out how good they are. Hexbows are insane. They've got run and gun. They've got really good weapons. They're probably making 3 shots a turn, which would be great. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Rocketeers, which I think, for my money, I think these might be some of the best scheme runners right now in the game, because they've got Up We Go, they're durable, they've got armor, they've got flight, they're minions, which is really important from a scheme scoring perspective, that they be minions so that they can score things, all variety of schemes. Actually, a lot of schemes really care about whether or not you're a minion. And they have they have one of the best melee attacks in the game, which is Up We Go, on a 2-inch reach, and they have one of the best fact actions in the game, which is onward. So in a kick the can scenario, you can kick, walk, kick with a Rocketeer. These guys seem like the bee's knees to me. So
yeah, no, they're phenomenal models. Absolutely. I mean, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, you know, fitting that same kind of scheme runner role, you know, without going into all the details on the card. One of the models that really stands out to me is actually Louisa Fusi.
Oh yeah, she's gonna be really fun.
Unreal model.
Yeah.
I mean, like, don't mind me, move 6, all terrain, so just ignores everything. Can bring models with her when she moves once per activate. Like, she gets anywhere that she wants to go, and just is a real pain for your opponent to nail down. I don't think that she's an always hire, but it's a very cool model. I expect I would probably bring it a lot.
I think the thing on Louisa is she's not an everyday food, but when she comes to the dinner table, holy crap, is she effective, right? You're bringing her because you want to see value out of Don't Mind Me, or you want to see value out of the displacement plus injured of Caught in the Treads, or you want to see value out of the all-terrain. You're bringing her for specific reasons rather than bringing John Watson and the King's Hand, which is just kind of like you're probably just most of the time bringing these, or you're probably most of the time showing up with some number of Hexbows. You're bringing Louisa when you want her to do a specific job, but holy hell, is she probably good at that job.
All right, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my favorite model on the keyword, and surprise, it's Bayou. And that's Judd and Honey with their stolen Hwacha.
Oh man, are these guys so good?
Man.
So the thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
These guys are only 6 points. I'm just gonna say that out loud so everybody on the internet hears it. Now that you've heard that this is just a 6-point model, Jesse, why don't you give the folks at home a little idea of what this particular gremlin with this particular Hwacha can do?
Yeah, I don't know why you ever don't take this model.
Yeah, I agree.
For 6 points, it's the cheapest model in the keyword, by the way, aside from Sappers. I forgot about those. 6 points, and it does so much for that 6 points that I can't see why you don't take it. I mean, it's got... anytime it helps out with the card draw situation, because if it shoots a model where one of its blast markers, which it has on every part of its damage track on its regular attack, is touching a friendly scheme or assault marker or a tide marker in the Clampets, you get to draw a card value 8 or less from your discard pile, which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Plus it has, it has the one ability that I think every shooty keyword wants: blow it to hell.
Yeah.
It gives Bayou access to a blow it to hell that they can just take whenever they feel like it.
It gives more healing to the keyword, plus some movement with Signal Flare to help pull your enemy model, or pull your models out of danger. It can hand out more staggered with its bonus action. It's got an 18-inch range gun with blasts on every part of its damage track.
It doesn't need line of sight.
Doesn't need line of sight. Like, none of its attacks need line of sight. You just basically increase a TN or give them a TN. So there's just so much that this model does. Now, we've been talking a lot about, like, discarding and hand pressure and stuff. So I wanted to just make mention of what I think probably a pretty key hire into this keyword is going to be, and that's the Guild Mage. Like, basically all of your models discard cards. So you already have a bunch of healing in the keyword, but the Guild Mage is going to give you more passive healing. It's going to do all the other stuff that Guild Mages do. Like, it turns into an issue of just not being able to fit everything into a crew, which is something that you mentioned at the top. There's so many good choices. You probably always want to have a Guild Mage in there. You got to see if you can fit Judd and Honey. You got to see if you can fit this, that, or the other. Do you take 3 Hexbows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Were there any other big out of keywords that you think came up with, Doug?
No, I think the most so also one point I want to close out on Judd and Honey on that Sam Barrows and I were talking about a lot. Judd and Honey might be the single best model in the game at just picking opposing totems off the table, because if you are using the clustered arrows on Judd and Honey, and you got an 18-inch non-line of sight thing, and you can get like a focus on Judd and Honey early, you can just you can try to severe a totem from anywhere on the board, ignoring line of sight, not really caring, and just trying to one-shot pick off things like Bruce from the Clampets, for example, or the puzzle box, something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a few totems in particular that would be very they'd really have a tough time dealing with it. One of the nice things with the Honeycomb Hwacha is, you know, if you do hit that severe and you hit the built-in trigger, then yeah, you're going to do a base 4. There's a lot of totems that can still survive that, but, you know, if you can get a focus on Judd and Honey ahead of time and then take another follow-up shot, you know, most models are probably going to bite it to another, you know, min 2, potentially 3 damage after that. Yeah.
And you can rush it. You can try to get a focus on it from somewhere and then immediately trigger Judd and Honey. And people, I don't think will see that coming. So
yeah.
Sure. But to close out on the out of keyword thing, no, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think the screams to me synergy level model here is the Guild Mage, which also just happens to be a really good model in and of itself. And the thing that it already wants to be doing, this crew is doing in spades. So
yeah, for sure. So I guess, you know, maybe some closing thoughts. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Cool.
I think the biggest one that I think of now that we've talked a lot and we've dissected both of the versions of Tull and all the things in his keyword is maybe, you know, how do you play against these guys? Or, you know, what is the counterplay to a Cavalier keyword? Do you want to take a quick shot at kind of your thoughts on how you would approach playing against these guys? And I'll close out and give mine basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the two things that there's really 3 things that I would say now that I think of it that would be really effective against this keyword. One of them is going to be damage mitigation of your own, because since most of the models just have min 2 damage, or the simple duels that they're putting out are dealing 2 damage, any kind of damage mitigation like armor, shielded, anything like that is really going to go a long way towards keeping your models on the table. I mean, there are a couple of things that this keyword can do to deal with armor, but it's usually like, you know, John Watson's melee attack. Like, you can't really rely on that necessarily. So I would say if this crew is going against another, you know, pretty armor heavy crew, like your Hoffmans, your Maythangs, your Mawtuckets, they might struggle a little bit to really put enough damage in. Yeah, and any kind of damage mitigation. Yeah, for sure.
Because the one thing they can do, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, if you let me, is they can just put expert marksman on Hexbows because they have a built-in tome, and that gives them built-in armor, but you're spending a lot of points at that point to do that. So
yeah, you are. I mean, do you take 2 of those with expert marksman? You know, maybe, but that's eating up what
they become 9-point models. Yeah, they become 9-point models at that point.
But that's always a legitimate concern. The other thing I would say is if you have a way to attack their hand, which, you know, there is a good amount of that in Malifaux, but this crew, if you start chewing away their hand, they are really gonna struggle.
Yeah.
Because they need cards to discard for heat of battle to really get the most efficiency out of their models. And this crew is loaded with TNs. And a lot of the TNs are fairly low, like 4s and 5s. But if you blow through your hand in 2 activations by cheating a few cards and then hitting a few heat of battles, you could easily find yourself with, you know, no cards left in your hand by the end of your 2nd or 3rd activation.
Yeah, and you need those for things like the Onward on the Rocketeer, or the Fistful of Arrows on the Hexbows, or hell, like, you know, a bunch of the other things we had talked about as well. So.
Yeah, so like if you have a way to attack your opponent's resources, you know, if they're playing Tull, if you can put a lot of simple duels on them, if you can directly attack their hand with discard mechanics, then they're probably going to be in trouble, because there's so many of these models have so much cool stuff that you can do, but you can pretty reliably say that you're only going to be able to do a certain number of those things a turn. So you really have to be careful about how you spend your cards. The last thing that I would say is this is definitely a crew where if you have access to a lot of marker removal, specifically scheme marker removal, you could probably really blunt Harold Tull's sword, so to speak. It's not to the same degree as maybe some other crews that rely heavily on terrain markers, where if you can clear them out, they're really going to be in trouble. But it's definitely something that Tull is going to be worried about. If you start being able to pick up his assault markers, because they don't do a whole lot until his models activate or the end of the turn, he could really find himself in a bad spot.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I want to add to that is don't play into the traps that this keyword is presenting to you. Don't try to stand off at range and try to trade shots with these guys, because they're probably going to generate more shots on average than you. And don't put yourself in a position where you can get tar pitted by the King's Wall John Watson combo, and then just end up not being able to kill anything, and then they shoot into that melee and just ignore every neg flip ever. I think that's a trap that a lot of people are going to fall into the first time they play Cavalier. So just be aware of that.
I think that you have to go into a game against Tull with some kind of a plan to deal with the King's Wall, because if you don't, it's just going to walk all over you.
Or be hyper opportunistic about going after pieces that aren't centrally protected, because at the end of the day, like Rocketeers have armor, but they're stat 5s across the board and they're only armor 1, and Hexbows, other than being stat 5 willpower 6, they don't have any defensive tech. So try to isolate those pieces when possible and pick them off the board quickly, so that Tull can't then heal them back or pull them into safety or whatever, basically.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing. Cool. So this has been kind of our first faction focus, guys, in terms of looking at the Madness of Malifaux book. You're going to see the full set of 6 from us with Jesse. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel. Let us know what you guys thought from a feedback perspective. Let us know in the comments what you're excited about. Are you excited to run into the Cavaliers? Are you excited to play with the Cavaliers? Are you excited to hopefully never have to see the Cavaliers against you? Let us know in the comments. And we're gonna have a bunch more coming on the Madness book. So thanks everybody for sticking with us. I guess before we clock out for the day, Jesse, do you wanna any closing thoughts? Anything going on Boring Conversation you want to plug? Anything going on in the Malifaux world on your end?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I would say is, and you're going to be hearing a lot about this if you haven't already by the time this comes out, but Captain Con's coming up.
Oh yeah.
The Malifaux Content Creators Invitational is going to be one of the marquee events, is probably one of the most unique events, I should say, in the Malifaux universe the whole year. And then the 50 Stone Gaining Grounds event that's going to be held Saturday into Sunday is actually one of the marquee events for the con. They really were impressed with how things went last year, and they've chipped in with a lot of support this year to help make it even more successful. I would say if you haven't booked your room yet, definitely do so, because the hotel room block closes on the 30th of December. And if you haven't registered, please do, because the sooner you register, the better a sense we have of what we need in terms of support from the con. So
yeah, and that was actually my first, that was almost a year ago now, right? That was my first major tournament that I ever went to, and it was really fun. I mean, what was your turnout for it was like 60 people or 50 people, something like that.
No, it wasn't that much. No, it wasn't. It was we had 10 teams of 2 for the Content Creators Invitational, and the Open had 36 players. Just to give folks some perspective, this year, as of the date of recording, I've announced I think 6 teams or 6 content creation channels, but we actually already have, I think, 11 that are registered. I'm just going to be kind of releasing those over the course of the next week or two. And there
I know
are still some
is sending
invites
2
out.
teams.
Yep. Yeah, we actually have 2 content creation channels that are interested in sending 2 teams, Danger Planet and Breachburnt, one of the new podcasts out of the Midwest. So we're looking at, probably a starting point for the Gaining Grounds event of 22 to 26 players, just from the content creators that are going to be participating. So my goal is to continue to drive public interest, and I really would like to exceed 45 players. 50 is my stretch goal.
Which I think honestly that'll be very doable. Me looking at the numbers on this, I know I have a lot of locals that haven't signed up yet, but are planning on going as well. So.
One thing that I would call out on that, and I'm going to be putting up another podcast ep about this later, but I'm going to be trying out something new. I'm taking something from the what do you call it? The UK Nationals, where I'm actually going to be giving out a special prize for the coolest board of terrain that a player brings to the GT.
Oh,
I
nice.
really would love to see some folks really stretch their hobby muscles and bring some very impressive tables for us to play on. Kind of spread the burden of providing some of that terrain and really gives folks an opportunity to show what they can do. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Cool. So keep an eye on the planet, guys. A lot more stuff coming from us, and you're gonna see us flush out this this madness of Malifaux faction focus series.
So what do we got next, Doug?
All right. So next one is gonna be the Red Library. So stay tuned.
There we go.